Well, hey, welcome to my kitchen. I am going to share with you today a recipe for creamy chicken and wild rice soup. This is the best soup that I've ever made. My wife and I make it often. It's not, calorie free. It's got a lot of cream and butter in it, but it is by far the best creamy chicken soup we've ever made. And we've embellished it a little bit by adding fresh sliced mushrooms, and it's a wonderful, wonderful comfort food soup. So let me get things ready and we will make chicken and wild rice soup. So the recipe calls for 2 cups of water and 4 cups of chicken broth. I just put in this whole thing. I think it's about 4 or 5. I think it's 4 cups, so that works out pretty good. Yep, 4 cups. Any chicken broth will do. So this, Uncle Ben's original long grain and wild rice, original recipe with seasoning, is the secret sauce for this recipe. The rice isn't anything special, really, but the flavor packet that's inside is the magic. We don't use this until we make the roux, so I'm just going to set it aside. But that is the special, very special part of this recipe. And I'll show you how to use that in a little bit. Now, the recipe calls for, let's see, 2 cooked boneless chicken breast halves shredded. But I'll tell you, the easiest thing we found to do is go to your grocery store and buy a rotisserie chicken. And then take all the meat off that chicken and shred it up. If you do that early, you just put it in the fridge to wait. But that saves so much time, so much energy. The rotisserie chicken, you can get it flavored if you'd like. If you take it off the bone and shred it up while it's still warm from the grocery store, it's so much easier. And then, like I said, just stick it in the fridge for a while if you're not ready to make your soup right away. But all that chicken's going to go in the pot. And lastly, the recipe doesn't call for it, but my wife and I found that just throwing a whole package of fresh sliced mushrooms in there just adds a little extra protein, and it's really fantastic. So that's everything that goes in the pot to start with. So I'm going to get that started on some high heat. It's got to come to a boil, and we've got a little bit more to add to it. We're going to need some flour, so 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. You don't have to get too sophisticated with your measurement because you're just going to add it a little bit at a time to thicken the roux. And then we're going to add to the flour a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Give that a little whisk around just to mix it up. And that'll be ready to make the roux. Once our pot starts a boil, you can turn that down a little bit. And we're going to let it simmer at a low boil. It's important not to start step 2, which is the roux, until after you've got the stock up to a boil. So to make the roux, we need a stick of butter. We're going to use some flour. We're going to use the special seasoning packet from the rice. And then at the end, we're going to add 2 cups of heavy cream, all in the same pot, so make sure your pot is big enough. The seasoning packet, the seasoning in here, I find to be very abrasive, and I've made this soup a lot, and as you can see, it's worn the Teflon off my nonstick pot. At least I think it's from making this recipe of soup, and the seasoning packet is somewhat abrasive. Anyway, so we're going to get started just by on really low heat melting the butter and getting that all melted first. All right, now that the butter is pretty much melted, we're going to add the seasoning packet and get that all hot and bubbly. And this seasoning packet really is, I think, the secret to this recipe. I don't know what all's in it. But it really adds a lot of flavor to the rice and to the soup. You can hear that kind of grinding though. That's why I think it's pretty abrasive and has taken some of the non-stick off my pan. So I'm turning the heat up just a little bit. I want to get that butter a little bit hotter. It should bubble just a little bit. And then we'll start to add the flour. All right, so the key for this roux is once you have the butter melted and the seasoning packet is to just add little bits of flour at a time. I'm putting in a tablespoon or so. And then just fully incorporate that flour into the roux. I'm on medium heat right now. If I think it's starting to burn, I'll turn it down to low. Sometimes I'll just move it off the burner halfway. And once that flour is completely incorporated, I get the next tablespoon. We may or may not need all 3/4 of a cup. You'll know when it starts to get pretty stiff that you're probably there. It seems really stiff when the first time you make it. And you can make it thinner or thicker to your taste, I guess. While I'm making the roux, I still have the stock pot on low. Still bubbling a little bit in there. Hopefully the rice is soaking up a lot of the moisture. That's the problem if you start the roux too early. It'll be ready to dump into the pot, and the rice may not have been fully cooked yet. I made that mistake once or twice. I guess I like making this roux so much. Once I decided to make the soup, I got everything in the stock pot and immediately started making the roux, and then the roux was ready, but my rice wasn't cooked yet. So you can see I'm just continuing to add more flour, a tablespoon at a time, stirring, making sure I don't have any major lumps in there, get all around. And we're thickening the roux as we go. How thick is too thick? Well, I don't know. But I'll show you when I think mine's thick enough. It'll be pretty thick. But then we're going to add 2 cups of heavy cream to this and incorporate those. So it's not like putting paste into the soup anymore. So I'm still just kind of working my way down my bowl of 3/4 of a cup of flour. You can see it's getting thicker. I can draw circles in it now. It's getting close. I've never made this as a gluten-free. I don't know honestly if gluten-free gluten-free flour is available, but I have some friends who are gluten-free, and it might be kind of nice if this soup turned out with because of gluten-free. Of course, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, it won't work because of the chicken. But so that's getting pretty close. I think I can probably make it a little bit thicker. It's getting a little hot, so I'm going to turn the burner down to low. Keep stirring. I'm going to add a little bit more here. If it takes this, I guess I will finish it all in there, but I think that's getting pretty close. Maybe a little bit more. There, that's the full 3/4 cup. So it's going to be nice and thick. I mean, you can see now that that is really, really thick. I'm going to slide that off the burner for a minute. I don't want it to cook. And I'm going to grab the cream. So we add the cream slowly to the roux on low heat and continuously stir the roux and the cream. So I've got 1 cup in there so far, and I'm getting ready to add the other. So this is heavy cream, not heavy whipping cream, or not whipping cream. I don't know what the difference is, but the recipe is for heavy cream. So I'm adding the second cup of cream in slowly and just stirring and stirring and stirring. This is supposed to be a relatively thick mixture when we're done. In fact, you can cook it a little bit if you need to make sure that it's thick enough. I'm not really sure what thick enough is, but I usually let it sit on low heat, stirring it pretty consistently for up to 5 minutes to get that cream and roux really, really combined. I can feel some kind of heavy spots where the roux is clumped together, so the goal is to get all of that really completely mixed and stirred, so you don't feel any lumps, no heavy spots. I think you can turn the heat up a little bit here if you're trying to thicken this. I'm gonna still pretty low heat. I don't want it to burn, but I do want to thicken it just a little bit. Alright, it's been a couple of minutes and just letting this all mix together. I don't feel any lumps anymore, any thick spots on the bottom, so I think I've got it pretty well incorporated. It's pretty thick. So we're almost ready. All right, I think we are ready to add our creamy roux to the pot. So we're just going to take the lid off. You can see that the mushrooms have cooked down. The chicken's it was already cooked to begin with, but now it's been heated through, and hopefully the rice has absorbed enough liquid. And it's time to stir in our roux. So we're just going to dump it right in and stir. Scrape out the pot as best you can. Get all that . Get all that creamy goodness into your soup pot. And then we're just gonna stir it up to totally incorporate and mix the two. Now it's important not to have the heat on very high at this point. You do not want to burn the soup at the bottom. But we are going to let it sit on low heat. It's as low as she'll go. And we're just going to let this cook a little bit longer, and then I'll take a little sample. I really just want to make sure that the rice is cooked all the way through. But you can see how thick and creamy that soup is. We'll put the lid on, keep it on low for a little bit, and we'll be back in a few minutes to do a taste test. All right, it's been a couple minutes, and I think we're ready for a little taste test here. Really just checking to see if the rice is cooked. If the rice is not hard anymore, then our soup is done. Ah, fantastic. So now we can either turn it off, or if we want to keep it for a little while to serve it, you can do that. It sits in the fridge well. It gets really thick after you cool it, and it's pretty thick after you reheat it. So just be aware of that. I've tried making the recipe a little bit thinner on the day I made it to try and make it not so thick. Hasn't really worked out all that well. So there is our chicken and wild rice soup, augmented with some fresh organic mushroom slices. I will put the recipe on the video again at the very end, so you can read it. But it's simple, it's delicious, and it's good comfort food.